Well, good morning, and what an absolute thrill it is to be here. I can't tell you what it feels like to go back in my mind and be the 15-year-old that ran away from school early and now standing in front of you as alumni colleagues and sharing some time with you. It's an absolute thrill. I want to also suggest to you that the talks that I normally do are not going to be presented today. I've actually taken this topic because it's a topic that I choose to live rather than just talk about. And the topic that we're talking about this morning is, how do you actually contribute to yourself as a person? How do you contribute to your community and at the same time feel good about who you are as a business person and succeed to the level that you want to succeed to as a business person? And as I look around and knowing there's so many people here, I guess it's something that rings true to other people as well. And I want to acknowledge right up front every single one of you that is currently contributing in some capacity to others besides building business empires. So that's the first thing that I want to say. And the next thing I want to do is to try and take you back with me on a little bit of a history lesson. And I want you to come back to 1997. And it's 1997 and it's Burwood Road, and it's the Swinburne campus in Burwood Road. It's the middle of winter. It's pouring rain. It is freezing. And it's a night class that you've got to get to. And you can't find a goddamn car park anywhere. Has anyone been there? Yeah. And so here you go, you're sort of rationalising in your mind all the reasons why you could turn the car around and just go home. Just turn it around and go home. And you're sitting in the car and you're sort of thinking to yourself, I seriously don't need this tonight. I've worked all day, I'm absolutely exhausted, I could just go home. But for me, what was really interesting was this other little voice that was happening, which was, you know what? You're putting yourself through this university course. You're paying for it out of your own pocket. The angels are with us. And doing that, in putting yourself through this is really expensive as an investment. And I thought about, thank you, and I thought about, you know, all these amazing things that I was wanting to achieve at that time in my life. And simply I just went, you know, just get a goddamn car park and get to class. I also had at the time a little 7-year-old girl that I was feeling really consciously aware that I was leaving her with babysitters a few times a week to get to class. And some of you probably have gone through that experience as well. So anyway, I park the car, I get into the class, and I'm a bit of a frustrated student. I don't know if anyone else was a bit like that. And I walked in, and in my mind, things should be ready when you walk into a class. You know, like things should be ready. Not sort of just starting to get it sorted. You know, hey, come on. So I get into this class, and I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. And then I look across the other side of the room, and the chairs were set up in a circle, you know, fishbowl style. And as I'm looking across in this circle with the fishbowl style, I'm thinking, oh my God, it's going to be one of those nights. It's going to be one of those nights where they shove us, the students, in the circle, and the lecturers look from the outside in at their human experiments. Has anyone else had this moment? And it's all, we're going to do all the work, basically, for the night. And I was really aware of that. And I have a really low tolerance for weird things in training. And that was sort of under my category of weird at the time. And so there were things such as role plays that, you know, pretend you're a tree or your favourite animal. Has anyone ever done that? You know, and I'm going relevancy, usefulness. So here we're sort of sitting around in this fishbowl experience, and my lecturer that night, who will stay unnamed as I'm scanning the room to see if he's here. Anyway, I won't because of potential litigation. But you know, the interesting thing is that he's okay. He was okay. And I'm going to call him Mr. B from this point on, okay? So, Mr. B. Did I hear someone say a name out loud then? All right. So, Mr. B starts the class off, and I want you to imagine Mr. B. He's a man that's been around, and I'd say he's been around in the 70s. And, you know, further beyond that. And anyway, so he starts the session off and he says to us, tonight we're going to talk about a particular question. And this question is so important in your life that if you could answer it, if you could answer this question, this would give you all of the information that you need to know to fulfill your life ahead and what you're going to need to do. And it will help you achieve self-actualization. And I've got to tell you, at the time I'm thinking, oh my God, everyone wants to be Abraham Maslow, you know? And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, this better be pretty good because I'm dripping wet and I'm sitting in the chair, and I could think of a million other places that I wanted to go. And there was a little cynicism in my head at that time going, here we go, we're going to get LSD that goes with this question. This is too out there for me. But I want to pause for a moment, and I just want to share with you why I was cynical and where my head was at that particular point in my life. In 1997, I was going through some turbulence because in 1994, I had lost someone very, very close to me. In fact, my husband of 10 years. And he was an incredibly successful young entrepreneur and business person. And he was someone who lived with stresses and strains, and through our marriage was also diagnosed with quite a severe mental illness. And so at the age of 33, he decided he couldn't live with his mental illness any longer, and he took his own life. And he left me with the most magnificent gift, which was a little 4-year-old at the time. And I had to decide again where I was going and what I had to achieve. And we lived with this experience of mental illness. So in 1997, I was tired, I was jaded, I was exhausted. And I had one constant looping message in my mind. I just have to be successful. I just have to be successful, and I've just got to get financial wealth. Because surely, if I have financial wealth, then everything else will be okay. I'll have choice. I'll be able to do all sorts of things in my life. And what happened was, I think I got confused. I think I got confused that wealth was a substitute for having to deal with some of the challenging things that can happen in your life. And I just wanted to be successful. And quite frankly, I was having to also deal with the whole sort of feeling of what it meant to lose someone at a very young age. So that's the sort of background. I'm tired, I'm sad, I'm angry at the world. I'm raising a young child of my own, and God damn it, no one's going to stereotype me as a single mum living on a pension, rocking up to Centrelink in my tracky dacks on a Thursday. It is just not going to happen in my world. I am no one's victim. But in being no one's victim, I'm pretty scary and I'm pretty angry. So come back to the class, come back to Burwood Road. Mr. B says to us, here's the question. Now listen really carefully, because it's only 3 words. And here's the question, everyone. He said to us, the rest of this evening's session will be spent with you answering just this one question. And the question is, who are you? And I've got to tell you, some of you may be sitting there thinking it's a really profound question. At the time, with the headspace that I was in, my challenging headspace, my immediate reaction was, ripped off. I'm ripped off. Because I was sort of thinking, you know what, buddy, come on. I'm paying a lot of money to be here in this course, and we're going to sit there navel gazing about who are you? So just imagine you're in that headspace. I hadn't read all of the books on self-development and self-discovery. I was raw, I was trying to survive, and I was trying to work out the fast track to financial success, and that question, quite frankly, was going to get in my way. So anyway, I sat there with this sort of rather irritated look. And Mr. B said to me, Dee, what's going on in your head? What's happening for you right now? And I'd come up through a Catholic family, you know, the nana that said, if you've got nothing to say, nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. So I sort of bit my lip there for a minute, and then out came, well, actually, quite frankly, Mr. B, I don't think this is an appropriate question for this environment. I'm here to fast track business success. I'm not here to answer such questions such as, who are you? Because seriously, quite frankly, I can do that under a tree on a Sunday afternoon with a big bottle of red and have much more fun, right? And so he said to me, well, Dee, if you don't understand who you are, then you're not going to understand what your purpose to life is. Crap, now he wants purpose to life as well as who am I? You know, this is seriously too much to take on board. I said, so here's the thing, I'm irritated. And he said, well, I think you're having some anger problems. Are you dealing with some anger at the moment? Because you're sounding a little aggressive. Not quite feeling the gestalt coming back here. Anyway, so I said, well, you know what? I am angry because I've done the cost analysis of this class for me. It's $220 an hour, and I'm not even adding the price of the babysitter and the inconvenience and the fact that I'm still sitting here dripping wet. So I just sort of feel like, as a consumer of education, I want to feel like when I walk away from a class, I've learnt more than what I walked in with. And he said, so are you saying that if you couldn't answer that question, or if you could answer the question, that in fact you wouldn't know more than when you walked in? Probably not, I said, because I'm paying you to teach me, not me. Now, I am angry and I'm aggressive because I'm wanting the fast track to financial success. This is fluff in my mind at that particular point in my life. Anyway, I then noticed all of the stares of my study buddies in the class, and I felt seriously like the only fish in the fishbowl experience being observed by absolutely everyone. And as they were discussing my anger issues, with their nodding heads, yeah, she's angry, that one, isn't she? Yeah, she's angry, she's got issues. And so, you know, I was sort of going, oh my God, this is crazy. What? Isn't anyone else interested in learning how to become wealthy? And I left that night, and I left that session that night, and I drove home and I was frustrated because I was thinking, you know what? Goddamn teachers, goddamn them, silly old hippie. Why doesn't he just do? And I was blaming and shaming and projecting, you know, all that stuff, the language we all learnt. So anyway, what I want to share with you and pause at the moment is that the moral to the story, for me as I reflect back with the absolute wisdom of hindsight, is that sometimes there are teachers that are put in your path and you as the student aren't ready to hear it. It's just not a match on that particular night. And that sometimes we can really confuse consumption of knowledge and information, and we confuse that with experience of new thinking. And we think that that's the value, that's the return on investment. The volume that I can consume rather than the quality that I can create of my own thoughts. That's taken me years to work out, not the angry lady that I'm sharing with you. So that was back then. Now I want to take you again on the timeline of the history lesson. It's now 2008. And you know, I mentioned I had a little 7-year-old. She's grown up now into a very vibrant 18-year-old. And her teenage years were really, really turbulent. And I couldn't sort of work out. I sort of thought, maybe I've substituted financial wealth and success from being a good mother. I thought I was doing a reasonably good job, but I thought I'd screwed up. And at the age of 18, she was diagnosed with a very, very severe mental illness. In fact, the same mental illness as her father. And she was hospitalised. She was a very, very, very unwell girl. And she was also traumatised by some of the things that occurred through her illness. And in fact, I'd say as a family, we were all traumatised. And I know statistically, as I look out onto the room, there are some of you also that have been touched in your personal lives with mental illness, and you know when I'm talking about trauma, what trauma means to a family when mental illness comes through the door. It's not just one person who suffers with the illness, it has a ripple effect for the whole family. So here she is, my beautiful, beautiful, precious girl at 18, hospitalised, very, very unwell. And the only thing I can think of at the time is, please, God, don't take her from me also. So we're sitting in a hospital garden environment, you know, a nice setting in a garden environment. And she was starting to realise just how unwell she had been. And that included several attempts on her own life. And we were sitting there and, you know, she said to me, Mum, I want to ask you some questions. And I said, sure, you know, what is it? And she said, who am I? Who am I now? Who am I going to become? What will this illness do to me as a person? And am I ever going to be normal again? And am I going to end up like my dad? And I sat there, and it's a moment where you seriously want to have all the profound answers, and you just flounder. You just flounder. And I said to her, honey, what's normal? What's normal to start with? I haven't met many normal people yet. I know I'm not one of them. And, you know, I sort of think in life, everyone can go through patches and periods of time where it's incredibly hard for you, and maybe this is just your patch. But I know something for sure. I know that if we work at it, we're going to do whatever it's going to take to make sure that you're going to be okay. And I'm going to be okay. We're going to be okay. Now let me go to the business environment at that stage. Really successful consulting practice, flat out. Achieved the stuff that I wanted to achieve. And I didn't think twice about going, I'm closing down what I need to just to be around, just to be available. There wasn't a question in my mind about what I needed to do and where I needed to be. And I'm not saying that as some sort of martyr or saint. Instinctively, it was a must. And so we minimised everything down in the business to just keep things ticking along and focused on what we needed to do as a family. So I guess one of the things that I'd like to do and like to think about here is that, what do you do when major things impact your life? Do you just sort of go, it happened and we move on? or do you sort of wonder about what you need to do with the message? And you know, I mentioned to you I wasn't sort of some new age guru, and it hadn't read all these sort of self-development books that all of my mates seemed to have read at the same time. But I remember one day sitting in the hospital and having on, I don't know, it might have been Oprah, it might have been Dr. Phil, you know, the top quality psychology. And I was sort of listening to someone talk, and they used this reference. They said, what's the mixed blessing? And seriously, when you're sitting in a psych ward, everything sort of sounds profound. So here we were sitting in this psych ward, and what's the mixed blessing? And I was thinking to myself, what the hell's that? What's a mixed blessing? And then there was this sort of conversation that took place amongst a few of us in that ward that day about maybe stuff happens for a reason, and maybe stuff happens because it's meant to happen in a way so that you can mobilise pain into something of good. And it sounds easy. It sounds really, really easy. It is not. Because you've got to work out where the hell it fits in your world, how it will fit in your world. And so I had the 10 years of being married to my first husband with his mental illness, and I had to learn how to navigate as a young woman the mental health system. Now I'm going to share with you, and some of you will already be aware, through the 80s and the 90s, the mental health system in Victoria was quite frankly archaic. It's getting better, it is getting a bit better, and if you're going to have a mental illness, Victoria's the state you want to be in for a mental illness. So I hope you feel good about that, okay? And so, compared to the other sources and services that are around. So here we are, and I've had that experience. Now I'm in an experience where we're talking about youth and youth in psychiatric care, and the absolute vulnerability of youth in psychiatric care. Someone so vulnerable that we put them into mixed adult wards and hope to God that they come out okay. And this is happening all the time. And I had a moment where I thought, you know, could I actually use some of the skills and the knowledge and the business acumen that I've acquired over the years? Could I use this and perhaps harness that and channel it in a way that I could use it for the mental health sector? And I became really frozen in fear because I was a layperson. I wasn't a psychologist. I wasn't a psychiatrist. I didn't have a medical background. But my God, I had years in the field of lived experience. And I had supported many, many people through psychiatric illnesses and psychotic events in their life. And that brought me to realise how absolutely critical and important the lived experience is. And that we can't discount lived experience and substitute it for medical models, for example. Now, let me be very, very clear. I have a huge respect for a great partnering experience with clinicians, practitioners, specialists, and people who are absolutely dedicated to this field. I'm not suggesting lived experience trumps that experience, but put them together, it's a magic ingredient. It's an absolutely magic ingredient. So I decided that I'd get busy and I'd advocate. I'm a really determined woman. You know, when I put my mind to something, I was one of those goal-setting, goal-achieving people. And so now I thought, you know, if I can do that in business, I can set my mind to setting some goals to advocate. And I went off on a charger to advocate, and I hit some brick walls. I hit brick walls of bureaucracy, and I hit brick walls of prejudices and stereotypes and stigma against people with just the lived experience, not professional background. And so that was a real challenge. I'll tell you what else was a real challenge. Where the hell do you fit it in your business day? And how does it fit within a business model? Now this was really interesting because if you want to build a profile as an advocate in something, you need to do your time and you need to do hours on your feet in front of people who can make a difference. You can't if you want to get, really dedicated to this, do it occasionally when you free up some time. You have to actually drill down the time and make it available. So what I've done and what we have done in our business model is actually work on a really simple 70-30 formula. 30% of my capacity is dedicated to this cause, and 70% better have really good billable activity to cover the 30%, okay? So it's like compressed timeframes. The 70% that you do in business, you've got to do it well. You've got to make a whole pile of money if you can, so it covers that 30%. So what I want to suggest here is that I then went about joining some groups, hearing some grassroots messages from other people, meeting some people from my tribe. And the tribe simply was others that had suffered, had loved, had lost people in their life with mental illness. And those of us that thought the system's screwed and we've got to do something about it. So national policy reform was my thing. So let me give you a very simple example. I'm asked to be on the executive of what's called the National Mental Health Consumer Carer Forum. And consumer, by the way, is a fancy word for someone who has suffered with a mental illness and brings their lived experience. So they consume the services. I'll let you know, most consumers hate the word consumer, as in consuming the services. And I'll also let you know, most of us that are identified as carers hate the word carers, because more times than not, we're mum, we're dad, we're sister, we're brother, we're partner, we're all sort of hybrids of people in other people's lives, and we don't have a label really that identifies with carer. And quite frankly, it's insulting for a lot of adults. This is my carer. Hang on, it's my mum, or it's whoever. So here we are. I'm identified as the national carer, and I have a colleague who's the national consumer. And we go up to Canberra, and it's a cross-sectorial working party. Now, cross-sectorial working party simply is a whole pile of people from a whole pile of areas and sectors that have to make decisions around mental health policy. So, sitting there in Canberra, and we were introduced to the groups. They were very senior bureaucrats, some of them ministers. And there was this first time experience of tokenism. Has anyone ever been on the receiving end of tokenism? There was this sort of knowing look and a little bit of a, okay, now here's Dee and here's Darren and everyone, they're the carer and the consumer advocates, which seriously was sort of code for they're people we've had to ask to this meeting because for compliance reasons, we've got to say that we have consulted with the public, and that's them. Don't worry though, they look harmless. They don't look like they could actually change any of our decisions. And I'm sure they're just very, very pleased to be here in Canberra, having a nice lunch and a cup of tea. And they'll sit there quietly and behave. And so Darren and I had consulted so widely with so many of our various groups and constituents of people who had the lived experience. We were locked and loaded and we were ready to go. We had prepared to an nth degree. Now, any of you that have done a syndicate group experience at 3 in the morning where you're still nutting it through solutions, that was Darren and I. We were not going to be tokenistic. But we had an advantage. So some of you who have done negotiation will know one of the worst things you can do in a negotiation is underestimate your opponent. To not check your assumptions or your biases or your views about people. So we sat there nicely behaving for the first probably half an hour, nodding. I personally felt like I was on the set of Yes Minister, and there were acronyms flying everywhere, and there were very serious faces, and there were banging on tables. It was really entertaining. And then it came to a point of quite a bit of contention from a national strategic policy point of view around mental health. And Darren and I waited quietly and we put our hand up. And we said, I'm sorry, you'll have to explain to us. You know, in that pathetic, I don't know anything, I'm just a middle-aged blonde lady that, you know, so, oh, what do you mean by that? And they showed their cards. And we had everything we needed. Now that sounds very cynical, doesn't it? And very manipulative, but it felt so good. And what we then did was actually unleash all our evidence and all of our information, and more importantly our insight, and convinced the particular group why they couldn't go ahead with what they were saying they were going to go ahead with. And we got a change. That was one of the first changes. And we went back and we finished our cup of tea and we sat there nicely. And one of the ministers pulled me aside. He said, "Dee, can I have a word?" "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Don't ever do that again." And I said, "What do you mean, do it again?" And he said, "Don't you dare come in here looking like a sheep when you're a sheep, a wolf in the sheep's clothing." I said, "That's your fault for underestimating who we are and what we can do." And so I guess the key thing for that experience is, if you have the skills, if you have the knowledge, if you have the lived experience of whatever the circumstances were in your life, you can use that, and the ability that you can get success in your business life can just be channeled into another area, and it's awesome. And when you work in that space and you're hanging out with people that are not doing what they're doing for money, there's an energy about it. There's a force, there's this sort of, oh, I'm sounding a bit sort of gestalt now, aren't I? But anyway, there's this sense of collegial experience, and it's a soul that can happen in a group. It's really powerful and really important. And so that's the sort of stuff from an advocacy point of view that I do. The other stuff I also do is I go into corporations and I bang on about destigmatisation of mental health in the workplace environment. I teach mental health first aid. And I've got to tell you, we have a real challenge in our Australian organisations around not being aware of the impact of mental health challenges in a workplace. We have legislation and policy that sets up people to not disclose their illnesses and to try and survive at work with an illness. And we do not have the right support services. So I just think it's a pretty cool thing if you can work with a group of managers and give them conversation skills that do not breach privacy, that do not breach sort of a personal disclosure with their staff member, but give them the ability to have a conversation with staff and never ever diagnose, but to help a person get to the right professional help that they could get sooner rather than later. So, coming back to Mr. B's question, who are you and what's your life purpose? Well, I'm not the angry person any longer. I've learnt to walk a little bit quietly and not use an energy of aggression to get change, but to use an energy of collectivism to get some change. And I'm also someone that decided that, you know, I was a damn good wife the first time. I could probably kick it in second time as well. And I've got a fabulous husband now who puts up with so much, and he became a financial business partner 5 years ago, which meant he got a bum deal from a return on investment point of view when you look at the 70-30 split. But he knows that, and he's willing for us to contribute in that way. And I've got a girl who's turning 23, and she's responding really well to medication. She's responding really well to the right treatments. And she's learnt that perhaps life's not going to give her the same competitive advantage as other people, but she still deserves a life of equality and a life of respect and a life of contribution. And she's really happy to do that. And I've also probably learned that sometimes a lesson can lay dormant in your mind for many years. And so I probably need to give a belated thank you to Mr. B, who I seriously thought was just being a lazy person that night, and thank him in hindsight for putting the question and sowing the seed of who the hell am I and what's my purpose. And so I just want to suggest to anyone who's thinking about what they could do to contribute, firstly to yourself, to respect and honour the pain perhaps that you've gone through, respect and honour the experience that you've weathered, and take the mixed blessing from that and say, well, what is that about? I want to also suggest that it's never done with your ego driving your decision. It's really about how you heal from the inside out, rather than expect people from the outside to fix what's happening inside. And so there are those of you in the room that are sitting there and you go, I do it already, Dee. Bravo, absolutely bravo. But if there are those of you thinking, where and what could I do? Think about what your life has presented to you. Think about the lessons you've learned. Think about who could benefit from your story. I think we do a really poor disservice to ourselves by not sharing our stories with one another. And you know, when my first husband died, at the time it was much easier for me to say to people who sort of knew me on the peripheral, he had cancer. Now that's horrible to have to say, isn't it? Instead of saying he suicided, I said he had cancer. Because I didn't want to have to explain to everyone. It just felt easier at the time. I'm not doing that anymore. I think that we have stories for reasons, and we have an amazing ability to pass that legacy on to others. And so just in finishing off this talk, asking yourself, you know, who are you? What's your purpose? What do you want to do with your life? And I want to finish by just asking for a bit of an indulgent request more than anything. I just want us to, for a moment, think about all of the people who have loved and have lost their life through mental illness, and to let them know, wherever they are, that there are voices like mine and thousands of others that will do a service to them and actually continue sharing the message of reform and change. Thank you.